Want to go far in business and in life? You can't do it alone. The secret is expanding your network of personal relationships, building friendships, connecting on an intimate level, away from the office, over a coffee or cocktail. Welcome to All In with Nate Payo, the show that asks what happens when you go all in and leverage the power of your network of personal relationships.
Hello, welcome to the All In podcast. I'm your host, Nate Payo. Today, I'm joined with Albert Salpetrier. He is from the Compass Real Estate Group, the In Group, out of Miami, Florida, and he's also the host of Miami Unlocked.
That is correct.
Podcast.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on to the show.
Thank you for having
me. We talk on this show a lot about networking and making connections and see where life takes us. And I think this is a perfect example with it. Is I had posted recently on LinkedIn just saying, hey, I'm looking for some people maybe in the startup space or in the fitness space, and they want to talk about what that looks like post COVID-19. And I was introduced from one of my connections to Albert, and he's like, hey, let's get on I'll get on your show. And, a couple hours later, here we are, we're doing it. So I think that just is a testament to where networking can take you and how quickly you can be introduced to people all over the country. So welcome. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. It's truly great to be here.
Yeah.
And I completely agree with, it's funny how things work, but if you are looking for a certain kind of result and, you're putting in the work and you have the awareness, such as utilizing, being resourceful, utilizing LinkedIn, utilizing networking events, then you somehow get connected to the right people for your industry or whatever it is you're trying to do. So thank you for having me here. It's awesome.
No problem. I think, you're in real estate and you came up through, I guess, New York real estate, which is, what is that, like the holy grail of being a realtor. But it's such an industry that is based on connections, who to get the best listings, who to get your clients to the best listings. And it constantly has to be worked. And a lot of people think networking's out there meeting people, shaking hands, and collect as many business cards as possible. But I think that's not really the real story. The real story is it's getting out there and making deep, meaningful relationships that take time to build. And over time, you really never know who's going to be that person that makes a difference in your life. So you have to constantly be reaching out to people, constantly connecting with people, and constantly trying to make introductions within your network to keep it going. So you got a well-versed background to do that. And I think those skills probably translate really well to doing your own podcast as well. So that brings me to the topic that brought us together is, what's your take on what things look like after COVID-19 and social distancing ends? Are we going back to business as usual?
Well, with COVID on our hands right now, we don't even know when this is going to really be over. They're giving us predictions month by month. It's changing. We really don't know when we're going to be out of this. However, what I can say is that there is still business being done. There are people still making purchases. There are plenty of people renting. I think my wife told me earlier, just in the month of April, there were over 3,000 rentals, which is huge. Versus the amount of sales that closed, which I believe were about 1,900, if not 2,000. So that's about a third more in rentals than in sales. So a huge spike, not to mention there were over 7,000 rentals available, active on the market for the month of April, which is huge spike up from usual. Mm-hmm. So in terms of the real estate business, things are still moving along. However, it's not as aggressive as before. Prior to this whole COVID-19 situation, it was a seller's market. And by that, sellers were really not budging from what they were asking for. Not much, at least within $5,000 to $10,000 increments, you may have a shot. But especially when you're talking about the $500,000 mark, when you're going up to $1 million, your increments may increase maybe 25 to 50 grand, but they really were not budging off their prices, and it was making it very, very competitive, especially when you had interest rates very, very low at that time. So you had a lot of people applying for mortgages, a lot of people trying to get in, and sellers were really taking best and highest, and a lot of them were getting above ask, actually. And now it's a buyer's market, I would say. And sellers, depending on where they're sitting, are willing to take much less than what they were originally planned for. I mean, look at 35 Indian Creek, listed for 25 originally, then got lowered to 21.95, and I'm talking million, and closed just a few weeks ago for 17. Then you got purchases in Coral Gables happening for 49 million. Then you got Pharrell buying a house also in Gables Estates as well for 30 million. So, I mean, it's to say that it's not a good time to do business is relative. I think it really depends on what segment of the market you lie in as a purchaser, and also as a service professional when it comes to being a realtor or a broker in the real estate industry. Your network and who you work with is also very important. How aggressive your buyers were, if you were working with any, being knowledgeable and consulting your sellers accurately on the market, and trying to convince them, hey, look, listen, it's not time to be stubborn right now. It's really a good time for you to really take a look at what you're getting as far as if any offers are coming through the table, and really deciding, hey, look, listen, am I going to wait another 3 to 6 months to get what I want? If I'm even potentially going to get what I want, that's a possibility. Or am I just going to get out now so that I can just move along with my life? So
one of the things that I've been around a lot of is my background is in residential building and I guess new construction, new home sales. And a lot of builders started, or they have had these 3D virtual tours for a while, but it was always a secondary tool. And now they become the primary tool to get people to see what a unit looks like, to see what a house looks like. And I think some of that's translating over to the resale market too, is you can't have an open house. You can't get a ton of traffic to come in through the door. But you're also talking about some really high upper end properties. How has using virtual tours been adopted in the resale market, and how is that different from like say your average median house for sale house going on the market, and you're expecting traffic to come in to find your buyer, whereas in a high end luxury real estate market, your traffic's going to be a lot lower, but people might be able to swing visiting the property because there's not going to be a ton of people going in and looking at it, and you're not going to be compromising social distancing guidelines. How are people adopting that in the high end market?
I think in the high end market, it becomes more about how long has that person been looking. To get new inspired buyers at this moment within the last 3 months, I think is dire, unless they're really eyeing the property that's like absolutely perfect for them, and they're able to get it at a significant discount, or to get it at a price that they're willing to pay. But aside from that, I think it really just has been about people that were looking before, and they had their eyes on a property, and they were probably just waiting to see if that seller was going to be willing to fold at some point, and now they're striking at the right opportunity. I think a lot of high ends are going to be looking in terms of the buyers during virtual tours. I mean, it's a tough call to make such a significant purchase with just a 3D experience. I think like any buyer, any product, they just want something that's tangible. Unless they know they're going to be buying it for investment purposes and the numbers are a no-brainer in terms of the profit margins that they're going to be making. Entering into that project to get end users, as we would say, which are people that we utilize as primary residences. 3D just gives them a more intimate feel of the space, which just it allows that listing to captivate their attention for a lot longer. You understand? It almost gives them more of it's a deeper commitment as opposed to I just like those pictures, right? So it just like brings them into a certain degree higher than just a regular fancy, just 2D picture. I think the 3D Matterport is huge right now, And for people who are potentially considering, or they are considering buying and they want to look at stuff, the Manaport has been huge for them because it allows them to literally be in the space without being there. And then from that point on, it just really becomes about the numbers, becomes about the layout, the space, and what they're looking for.
Mm-hmm. I think you touched on it right there. Is the technology is still not the solution. It's a tool. It's a way to show people. It's a way to garner interest. And maybe it pre-qualifies, looky-loos from, hey, I kind of made up my mind. I don't want to go see that property. So you're going to get your traffic numbers maybe become less, but your ratios of people that have shown interest or serious buyers becomes higher because, okay, I'm not going to go waste my time looking at properties I have zero interest in. I'm really only going to spend a lot of time researching the ones I have a ton of interest in, and then I'm going to go see those in person. And I think you're still right. People want to see things. People want to touch things. I don't see that changing a whole lot differently after people, go away. But I think, companies might want to adopt those tools to help, remote buyers or people that are looking to relocate. Hey, let's get a feel for what we're looking at first. And it's going to save realtors at time. You don't have to go show 10, 20 properties. You go show 3 or 4 and narrow the choices down. So everybody's able to do their work a little bit more efficiently. The buyer's able to find their house a little quicker or a little less headache, but you're still going to want to tie it in first. So,
and I want people to understand something. I want people to understand that there's different levels to this industry. Your first year realtor is not going to do the same as your 5th year realtor. There's no escalator to this game. Even if someone that's going to just bring something to your plate that's going to be a significant purchase in the millions, you still need to know what you're doing. So with that being said, I also just wanted to clarify for the record that everyone, no matter what it is that they do, we're all in the people business.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's all centrifugally revolved around. People. It's all about people. I sell real estate, but the key is people. Any other service, anything that they do, the caveat is people. No people, no service. Nothing has value without people. So yeah. I just want to reiterate, we're all in the people business. And when it comes to higher priced items, when you're dealing with these kinds of properties that I talked about, it really goes based on that relationship.
So that's something I want to ask you a little bit about. So you're in a people business, which I think when it boils down to it, everybody's in, but you're in a very specific trusty relationship. Your people are counting on you to show them the house where they're going to raise their families. They're going to have their experiences. It's for most people, it's one of the biggest purchases they'll ever make in their life, and they're probably not going to do it, that many times. They might do it 2 or 3 times in their entire life. Right. And there's a lot of people I see. They want to go out there and they want to be a realtor, and it's not something that you just start and you show up Monday and on Friday you get a paycheck. You have to kind of grind it out for a little bit and build a book of business and make these connections with people. And I always see people that kind of go part way in and they take a second job, or maybe it's their first job. Maybe they're bartending or waiting tables, or they're doing some other line of work, and then they're doing realtor on their side. I got my license, I'll sell my friend's house. And I always look at that and say, hey, if that might work, if you were starting a side hustle, but selling real estate or being a representative of somebody buying real estate isn't necessarily a side hustle. And I think it's a full-time job. And to me, if I was looking to hire a realtor and it wasn't their full-time job and it wasn't their only job, I would just be like, I'm not sure they're taking it seriously enough, because you gotta be out there at especially if you're getting started, you gotta hit every Chamber of Commerce mixer. You gotta be at every BNI breakfast. You gotta be, having coffee, having lunch. You gotta be, if you're sitting at home waiting for your phone to ring, that ain't gonna happen. You have to be where the people are and constantly introducing yourself to what people can do and offering service and offering value. So I just wanted to get like maybe your take on advice. If somebody's like, hey, I'm thinking about stepping into the realtor world, can I do it part-time and figure it out?
Advertising is huge as a realtor when it comes to advertising ads, advertising listings, you're advertising seminars and things of that sort. Those things are huge. Like starting as a realtor in New York was a real, it was a quick learning experience if you wanted to stick in it,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, literally only 2%, I believe, 20% of realtors stay in the business, 80% quit. Or I think it's 2%. I'm not even sure. Don't quote me on it. But it's not a lot of people do it part-time because they know someone that's a substantial like pipeline for them to, crank a couple of deals a year, which is absolutely fine. But there's a reason why, the best golfer in the world isn't also a part-time plumber, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think everyone deserves to be an expert in their niche, because I think there's a lot of other realtors who do it on a full-time basis who'd be able to service that client better, being more on top of the transaction, even finding ways where they can save them money or be a better negotiator, because this is something that they come across all the time. They see contracts all the time. They've dealt with different price points. And they've dealt with different kinds of people, whether they're sellers or buyers or attorneys. So they kind of have more of a familiarity when it comes to those transactional situations. And they know how to capitalize, whether it becomes concessions or getting someone a reduction on their closing costs or being able to work the commission. You understand? No deal is concrete. Every deal is a set of variables. And depending on how you play with those, whether it's to the seller or to the buyer's desire, when it comes to like what they want to implement into the contract, that then becomes its own unique algorithm to the transaction being closed. Mm-hmm. So I think someone who's looking, it depends also which market you go into. New York is not a market that you can go into part-time and last. It's really not. It's a tough market. You're dealing with the most educated consumer in the entire country, if not. Maybe San Francisco will be competed with them. But I mean, those people are sharp there. And so it really becomes about you embodying fully being a realtor. And it's like being knowledgeable, being great with people, also understanding cues. Like prior to being a realtor, I was in sales for like over 12 years. And I worked at Saks. I worked at high-end companies like Loro Piana, Brunello Cucinelli, sold Xenia and things of that sort. So I'm used to dealing with higher-end clientele. And with that being said, it just teaches you, and I've worked my way from the bottom up, from MBA Store and Banana Republic, places like that. So I've seen every different kind of personality at every different kind of income bracket, if you will, from the bottom all the way to the top. And when you have over 10 to 12 years of that kind of experience, you tend to recognize certain cues, and you tend to also understand how to behave with someone who is approaching you in a consumer transaction, whether it's selling clothes or you're selling them real estate or you're selling them jewels or you're selling them a watch, right? Every single client's going to be different. So you need to know how to appeal to their psyche to kind of remove their mind from the fact that they're doing a financial transaction and more into the mind frame that I am going into an experience with this individual who seems to have my best interests, who seems to know what he's doing, and he's going to guide me there to the result that I want, whether it's to sell or to buy. And that takes a lot of work depending on the kind of clients you deal with, You're not going to have the same energy exerted for a $1,300 rental as you would for a $20,000. And it just goes up from there, So it's all about approach and how much you embody that profession and how sharp you want to be, what potential you want to reach within that business. And that's going to dictate what level you're going to be able to reach. And if you stay consistent, eventually you'll get to a cruise control where that's the kind of clients that you're going to have on the regular. And I say, sky's the limit for anyone.
Yeah. I've noticed that, like in my neighborhood, there's like two or three realtors that, if their sign goes in the front yard, that house is going to sell for asking price or above. 2, it's going to sell quickly. And 3, the transaction is going to close and another sign is not going to come up on that person's house. But then I notice other people use lesser known people, and I don't know where they find them, but they show up. They put them up, and I'm like, okay, they're up there, and 2 or 3 months later, like the sign comes down, they put somebody else's sign up because the contract expired, they couldn't get sold. And I'm always just thinking, the people that you see around all over the place, it's not by accident that they sell at the premium price, that they sell quickly, that they close. They have a huge network of people, but they're also, I think, very connected in the community, and that's something that goes a long way with if you, hey, I want to move into this neighborhood. You're not just selling the house, but you're selling the neighborhood, you're selling the people that live there, and you're selling who the neighbors are, you're selling the schools, you're selling the restaurants, you're selling the grocery store, you're even selling the dry cleaner. Yeah. And that kind of leads me to this other observation with how realtors tend to use social media. It seems to be a lot of, here's a house, here's the pictures, here's the description of what the property is. And I've thought, like, hey, if I was in the realtor business, I would just, find my niche of where my market was, and I'd get it really narrowed down to a few neighborhoods, and I'd just become the supreme expert in that. Like, and I would be talking about, like, hey, here's a great house for sale in this neighborhood I represent, but also I'd be like, hey, this is the local barista at the coffee shop, and this is, who you would meet and who you'd interact with. And I just really spotlight a lot of the people that you're going to interact on a day-to-day basis within the community, and kind of you're selling the whole community. Like, hey, I really like this community. I start researching it, and I see this realtor popping up talking about all the stuff going on, and they seem really connected, and I kind of want to reach out to them and find out. And then, like, it all just kind of builds on this idea of, like, hey, I'm the expert. I know everybody in the neighborhood, and I'm the go-to person you want to go to and trust to move into this neighborhood. Have you seen realtors execute a better social media strategy than others versus just posting pictures of the properties or listing?
So, great question. There's actually a guy, his name is Kevin Crutchfield. He sells a lot of high-end, especially in like Fort Lauderdale. And he has a great social media page. But one thing I can guarantee you is that no one is looking at social media and they go, I want to buy that house. I don't think that that's where you're going to get your $1 million buyers. I don't even think that's where you're going to get your $500,000 buyers. I think that social media serves as an extension, just like this podcast does, just like my videos do, for exposure. It kind of just shows that as a business or whatever theme you're going by, like you're full-fledged and you have all your corners covered, right? I mean, it's a great point of view to have it on your social media because it gives you a different sense. Like, it gives you just general pictures on the property, maybe different angles and things of that sort. But then you also have like the 3D Matterport, right? Mm-hmm. And that gives you that real feel of the flow of the house. And you can just go into every crevice and corner that you want and look at it from a closer point of view, excuse me. But I don't think that buyers are going on social media and looking at homes to buy. I think social media is more driven towards different kinds of businesses that are more centered around imagery, like, tattoos and art. And then you have, models and mm-hmm. They're all advertising supplements and things of that sort. But so I don't think that it's getting many buyers, but I think that agents that do have social media pages and they have a presence there and they put up nice pictures of properties or they keep some kind of update on what they're doing or what they're dealing with, I think that just gives them a better impression as far as for newcomers and people who know them when it comes to how serious they take their business.
I think it's also a place to showcase who you are as a person, and maybe you're a little bit more relatable to, like you talked about exposure. you have a shared commonality about something. If you have similar interests as somebody, you might be like, oh, now I feel like I'm more connected to this person that I'm chatting with about representing me in a real estate transaction. And you're building that trust, and you're able to talk. Usually trust is built because you like people, and the conversation flows smoothly, and you just, hey, they kind of get me, I kind of get them. And that's by letting your guard down a little bit and having something that's relatable and in common with each other. And that is a starting point for a relationship to build. You're like, hey, I trust this person. They got a lot of similar interests. We get along real well. Let's do it. So I think it's going to give you a better look. It's not going to be, it's not going to be the decision to buy or not buy a certain particular house, but it might be the thing that gets you exposure to more people to reach out to you in the future. And again, in real estate, it's a people's business, because we might meet today, but it might be 10 years from now before I move to Florida. And if I need to buy a house in Florida and I don't know any realtors, I'm going to call you because I met you 10 years ago, And
awesome.
so
let me give you advice. Buy now.
Yeah, for sure. So you also run a podcast. We talked about Miami Unlocked. What's your podcast about? What can when people expect when they listen to that?
So I just started this podcast literally like 3 days ago, which is funny. And it's just something, it's really not something I'm aiming for like notoriety. I just want to create a platform that provides anyone from any walk of life to be able to just call in if they want, and just, share whatever it is that they want to share based on the topic that's being discussed, or if they have something that is relatable to it, or whether they want to say their own piece. That's absolutely fine. I just think that all the information that we've been getting for the last 2 months has just been from the same kind of sources, and it's like none of it is really, none of it is positive. I mean, we are seeing some positive signs of the world of like togetherness and the fabric of humankind and things of that sort. But I think right now, more than ever, being that what is happening is so unexplainable to an extent, I think it's more important than ever to really hear how people are feeling, what people are thinking. They say that everything's going to be different after this. And I mean, I want to know what people have to say based on this time that we're going through right now. I think that a lot of people are just kind of waiting it out. I mean, I have 2 kids here. I have my wife and my dad visiting me from Brazil. And it was a certain kind of time in the beginning. It was like, okay, this is weird, this is funky. And then, 4 weeks go by and then it's okay, all right. And now we're in week 7 now. And now, you're really starting to see, somewhat of a loss of patience a little bit. I still know a lot of people. I have a lot of family in New York. So I talk to them all the time. And people up there are losing their patience. Imagine, like, I'm here in Miami, Florida. I have a backyard and stuff, so I can go outside, breathe some fresh air, sit in the sun, barbecue if I want. Up there, they're just like stuck in an apartment. They can't go outside unless you have a terrace or a balcony. You're not coming out. So, and it's a ghost town by 8 p.m. over there, which is super unusual. I mean, not a pin drop in times.
That's crazy. But you're right. Like, what I like about the podcast format is everywhere else, everything's so fast paced. Nobody has the time to watch anything longer than a few seconds. If your video is 2 minutes, nobody's going to watch it and get to know you. But a podcast, at least, I think people want to sit in, they want to listen. They know that it's going to be a little bit longer than a few minutes. They can listen to a bit now and a bit later. I mean, definitely they're not commuting as much as they probably were in the past, which was a good place for a podcast. But you're able to have a more in-depth conversation, a more real conversation with people. And the other cool thing I found about it is I've met people all over the world, Australia to Europe to, people in Florida, people in New York, Pennsylvania, all just because of getting on a show and saying, hey, I have a podcast. I want to talk to cool people. I want to hear their stories. And it's led to some friendships. It's led to ideas that you're not necessarily would have been exposed to any other way. And you just kind of go, hey, people live differently than I do, and people have different views than I do. And it's going to shape the way we create and do things in the future. And I think the more you can be exposed to a lot of different points of view, I think you're going to be able to serve humanity in a better fashion and like a big picture thing. But it's just, all in all, it's like a fun way to just have a conversation with somebody, and you never really know who's going to make a huge impact in your life and who's going to be, like every time you meet somebody, it could be briefly at the gas station, or it could be on a phone call, it could be online, and that person could be for a minute that you pass by and you say hi to, or that person could turn into somebody for the next 20, 30 years and do a lot of cool things together. So it's amazing what the world can provide when you just are open to meeting and connecting with different people.
Yeah, I think that's what we're meant to do, to be honest with you, because everybody is just having a different experience within this living experience. And the more that we share, the more we become aware of what is, right? Because no day's the same, And I wanted to ask you, so what inspired you to start your podcast, and what is your mission statement? Like where do you want this to take you? Because it's already taking you interesting places. It
is, and that's kind of it in a nutshell, was to see what happens. Like I've in the past, I've wanted to do entrepreneurial stuff, or I had bigger ideas, and every time I kind of got going with something, I would let my own fears and self-doubts kind of get in my way, and I would pull back from being as open-minded as I needed to be to see things through fruition and really, in a sense, go all in on the idea. And so I'd abandon it. And I had watched people that were kind of starting in similar processes at the same time I was, and they stuck with it and they had some success. And I always kept going back like, man, I wish I hadn't just kind of gotten into my own head and given up, and actually tried to continue with something and see what happens. Because of the reasons I told myself, like, oh, you're not smart enough, you're not as big of an expert to be somebody that talks about that, wasn't necessarily what other people thought, is what I thought. And I had this realization a few months ago, and I was at the time kind of looking back at how my career had progressed over the last 5 years, and it had kind of exploded exponentially. And I attributed a lot of it to networking with more people outside of my immediate industry. And I just started to realize, like, hey, the more people I met, the bigger my tool chest was to solve problems and serve other people. And so I just kind of said, hey, why don't I just do a little experiment? Because I'm always picking it out. So I'm like, I'm just going to do it all. I'm going to get out of my way. I'm going to do the things that scare me. I'm going to meet as many people as I can. And I don't know where it's going to go, but I know it's going to take me down a path, and there'll be some opportunities that come up that I had no idea of what to expect. And I just want to be aware of when they show up and try to take advantage of them. And that kind of led me to this idea of doing a podcast through, I was kind of kicking it around a little bit, like when I would meet people and chat about business, or I met with them and I'd walk away after like a coffee or a beer and be like, that was a really cool conversation. We talked about a lot of cool stuff. And I thought, hey, that would be kind of an interesting idea for a podcast. It's just this get to know you type situation. And then I heard a Gary Vaynerchuk video where he talks about the kid in high school that wasn't that cool, but his parents went away for the weekend, and he was able to have the parties at his house. And because he could have the parties at his house, all the cool kids came to his house and partied with him. And by default, he became cool. And that's really what a podcast is. It kind of allows you to connect with people you wouldn't necessarily have had the chance to under other circumstances. And it allows you, I think, to also reach out to people that maybe you don't feel you have the clout to meet under other circumstances. Like if you saw somebody, he just said, hey, let's get on a phone call. And they're like a big shot in the industry that you're trying to get involved with. They might not take your phone call, but if you're like, hey, I got a podcast, you want to come in and talk on it? They're like, yeah, sure, let's come and talk. And now all of a sudden you're having a conversation with somebody that you might not have been able to take your phone call to begin with. So that was where it kind of sold me on it, was just, it's a way to cast a little bit bigger net. It's a way to meet people. It's a way to also help people come to you instead of not you always trying to go to them. Makes maybe your life a little easier to meet more people. And then the end of it is like, hey, I'm meeting really cool people that have interesting stories. Now I'm able to connect them to people within my network. Maybe it's a personal introduction from you to somebody else I know, but it's also like I'm introducing you to the people that are interested in me. And hopefully that leads to some other people coming your way and they're able to support you in what you do too. So that's kind of been my mission there.
That's amazing. And I think that's very inspiring for people who are looking to find a way to do their own thing, whether it's in business or anything else. The thing about it is, I think based on just, everyone, like I said, everyone's living experience is different, but I think everyone shares that commonality where when it comes to, our own ideas or our own, there's something that we feel we need to do, right? And, trying to do that, especially if it's different from the norm, I think we just always encounter that natural resistance, right? Because it's just like, it's just something completely different than what you're used to, than what you've done, and then the people around you do as well. And I think that people need to hear it more often, where you need to be resilient and persistent, for whatever it is you're looking to do. Even if you don't have a clue about what you are doing, okay? As long as you can do the things that you can control to the best of your ability, whether it comes to be ready and willing to learn, presenting yourself well when it comes to hygiene and well dressed and clean shape. When it comes to the kind of information you're surrounding yourself with, like everything is within our control. And I think that we are just always our worst enemy because of, that upbringing of just, it depends on your parents too, or where you were raised. But I think that just a lot of people, they struggle to stick with an idea that comes within themselves because they just always kind of give up. The whole key is not giving up. As long as you don't give up, you're gonna make it happen, because human beings are made to do amazing things, right? And I think that it's good also to remind people who are looking for a way, which I think a lot of people are, especially right now, trying to figure out what's the next step, the next move. And I know that it's kind of like a very like downtime for us as humanity. But at every moment there lies opportunity, So, it's funny because before, I remember I was hustling, bustling like crazy, going to firefighter school at night, doing real estate during the day, picking up my kids, taking them to school, doing all that stuff. And it was like nonstop. And all I was wishing for sometimes was like, man, I wish I could have like a whole straight week off and stuff like that. And like, I just wish things would slow down. And it's so funny now I'm on the other side of that spectrum. Everything has completely slowed down. I don't have to really, really do anything. And I'm doing everything that I can with the momentum that I can pick up at the moment. And it's just funny that being on the completely opposite spectrum of that side. And now all of a sudden, I wish that I had that busyness. I wish that I had a lot of things going on the table. So it's definitely a huge time for gratitude at the same time.
For sure.
And it just also allows us to see what we value and focus on.
All right. I got a couple more questions for you. What would be your parting advice to anyone looking to, well, you may have just given it to at the same time, but, you're looking to grow your network, you're looking to make connections. What's your advice to somebody getting started on doing that? What should they
something that's huge for me, that was a huge lesson for me in my life, was the statement and the phrase of being honest with yourself and being honest with your intentions, right? Because like the quicker you are about that, the quicker you'll get to know the quicker you'll figure out how to get where you want to go, right? Because you're going to know who you need to talk to, where you need to be, what you need to do, what kind of work ethic you need to put in, what kind of investment you need to put in, right? So being honest about all that, about who you are and where you want to go, that really, I think, by doing that, you kind of bring down that ego, you bring down that self, whatever you think is confidence, I guess. or your interpretation of your own grandeur in your head of how big you are to yourself. And I think that when we kind of just drop all that stuff off, because you have to realize that whatever it is that you imagine in your head or that's coming from within you that you want to do, like that is the expression of your life. That's the expression of your soul. Now, whether you decide to make that into fruition is up to you. But by making that into fruition, you are actually also growing in terms of your potential, because you are starting to see and demonstrate to yourself that you can be self-reliant and self-sufficient.
Yeah, that's some great advice there. Last question would be is where can people find you? Where can we direct them to get connected with you?
Well, people could find me on my podcast, but right now I haven't really set up a website or anything at all. So you can reach me. You can reach me at my email, which is asalpetrier@gmail.com. That is asalpetrier@gmail.com. Or you can simply give me a call at 786-899-7531. Again, that is 786-899-7531. This is Albert Salpetrier with the M Group. You can also find me on compass.com. I'm in their agent directory.
Awesome. That'll be all on the show notes for everybody to find, and they'll be able to get connected with you. So, Albert, thank you again for getting on the show, and a very quick turnaround. And loved having you. Love getting to meet you.
Thank you, man. Thank you for having me. I hope we can do this again.
Yeah, for sure. Have a good one.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you.
Make sure to visit our website, therealnatepeo.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, so you'll never miss an episode of All In. While you're at it, if you found value, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or if simply tell 2 friends about the show. Looking to connect? You can find Nate Peo on LinkedIn or Instagram.